They look after their children, their family and so on. But, and as they see it, they saw legitimate targets in soldiers and agents of the British state. And what they would never do, of course, is kill innocent civilians. But I believe that's what may have happened. Hamid Khan may have been someone who was interested in trying to carry out attacks abroad. But that's a very different matter than carrying out indiscriminate suicide bombings in London. And the problem with all of this now is it's all become very, very confused. Because we have, obviously, our troops illegally occupying a foreign country. What situation does that create then? Because the people resisting that occupation are like the French resistance, resisting Nazi occupation in the 1940s. So whose side are we on? The side of somebody who thinks he's going to bomb Western troops because they are invading illegally occupying countries, and nobody from the world, of the UN or anything like that, seems to want to do anything about it. So what do you do in those circumstances? What's also worrying about 7/7 is the witness reports. Again, nobody seems to have seen these so-called suicide bombers. The bus bombing, for example, is particularly suspicious, where somebody said, oh yes, I saw that guy on the bus and I got off because he was behaving so suspiciously. And yet this guy gives his account of what Habib was saying, he was saying it's supposed to look like, and yet he gives different accounts of different newspapers. We have similar accounts from people who were involved in the tube bombings, and accounts seem to change. And it's a bit like the Menendez thing. Do you remember all those reports in the papers about how he leapt over the barriers and went running down the platform and all this sort of thing? The person who gave that witness statement has completely disappeared. No one can trace it. It's almost as if they're planning for kind of false flag operations, or whatever you want to call it. It's so great that they have people on their side who are there to be witnesses at the time, to either create confusion or take the whole story down a false track. And that's what appears to have happened with 7/7. When we do get witnesses who are there, though, people like Bruce Late, they give a very different impression than what we're led to believe by the official story, that this was carried on, is exposed to be carried on by those four men in rucksacks. Bruce Late is absolutely clear. He was in the carriage that was bombed, and he says, I did not see a Muslim there with a rucksack. But when I came to afterwards, what I saw was metal pushing up into the carriage. Now that is an indication, it's not proof, it's an indication that the bomb may have been placed underneath. The reason I say it's not proof is the complexity of explosions and the physical effects of them when they go off. There are so many variables involved, you really couldn't rule out anything one way or the other. But you'd have to come to the conclusion that it was more likely bombs were underneath, if metal was pushing up into the carriage rather than going down. There's also sort of stories as well about how the firemen were initially stopped from going down to help the wounded and so on. They were held up. The police said, oh, there may be more bombs. Now, I've never heard that before. The firemen, normally that's part and parcel of the fireman's risk. They go in there and try and put out fires and help the wounded at risk for their own lives. There may have been a booby trap bomb to go off. So again, we've got to wonder why the firemen were kept away from the scenes of crime to start with. And there is evidence of the intelligence service's involvement in 7/7, but you wouldn't read about it in the mainstream media, or you read part of it in the mainstream media, because this is what seems to happen to 7/7 is we've had lots of leaks, even though off the record leaks, they're going to get to the bottom of. But the papers were more or less unanimous shortly after 7/7 in concluding that Haroon Rashid Azrat was the mastermind of the bombing. And apparently, 4 suicide bombers had been in touch with him by phone on the day of 7/7. So the implication was, of course, that he somehow ordered the attacks. This guy left the UK on the 6th of the 7th, so again, it looked like he was fleeing before the attacks happened. He was then arrested in Pakistan. And of course, you'd think this would be a great opportunity to extradite him, but they don't. He's then released. Instead of denying he's ever arrested at all. Something similar happens in Zambia. Finally, he does come back to this country. And in the meantime, we've had a program in America. John Lofthouse, who was a former Attorney General in the US, so someone quite well placed, someone like to jump to conclusions, came out with the story that Azrat, at least in 1999, had been working for MI6. And the reason he knew this was he tried to have Azrat arrested in the US in connection with a terrorist training camp in Oregon. had said, look, we can't go there because this man's working for MI6. So the FBI had been forced to let this guy go as an MI6 agent. And that's not clear proof that he was still working for MI6 in 2006. But someone somewhere should be asking that very obvious and pertinent question. And of course, no one in the mainstream is. So we're left with this essential problem in which we have the intelligence services, or elements of the intelligence services, carrying out these attacks on behalf of who? I want to make absolutely clear here as well, I don't think that Blair and Bush are involved. They're the patsies, they're the puppets. And this is important because, as we've seen in this country with Thatcher and now with Blair, it's very difficult to get rid of unpopular politicians because of the system. And this is where we need to change the system. When I say things like the shadow government, or the New World Order, or the Illuminati, or the Zionists, I think we all know what we're talking about. And these are not fanciful ideas. There is lots of evidence for the existence, for example, of skull and bones, which both George Bush and John Kerry, his opponent in the 2004 election, belonged to. I mean, what a farce of democracy. It didn't matter who the Americans voted for, you still got a bonesman in charge. And other people have commented on this as well. I mean, it's worth mentioning that many American presidents have commented on the shadow government. In fact, Roosevelt called them the invisible government, the most corrupt force in the politics of America. So there is the stuff there to look, the existence of these things. So people have imagined this is some kind of fanciful idea that we're paranoid about this stuff. It's entirely wrong. And it's not just obviously in the area of false flag. We believe